the agenda for today. This might be a series of session. Probably I might not be able to cover all of this in today's talk in 30 minutes. And there are a lot of concepts that I have not even added in this talk. So it could be the series of sessions that I'll be doing in future. But for today, now, before I even start the session, I'd be happy to be interrupted by you guys in between the talk, or you can raise your question either in the chat or you can interrupt me and you can ask. I'll also take pauses between the session and you can basically ask me questions there. So the agenda for today's talk would be, are we recording the session?
Yes, I've hit
Yeah.
record.
Yeah. Yeah. So the agenda for today's session is that we'll discuss a bit on what P2 framework is. Then we'll discuss a bit on the Atlassian plugin SDK. We'll then go into the basic file and folder structure that SDK provides us when we initially run the command to set up the project. We'll then go into the OSGI and the plugin building blocks. Then we'll discuss more on the modules, the descriptors, about the servlet module, the templates, and then we'll go discuss about the webpack configuration that will actually be used to render the React application into one of the servlet. So yeah, first of all, let's discuss what Atlassian plugin SDK is and what a P2 framework actually is. So P2 framework was created by Atlassian for developers to extend the basic functionalities of Jira, and with that to ease the development for developers, they have provided the SDK, which we can use to set up the project or add the modules and do various different things that are actually required to create a plugin. So SDK is basically just a set of shell scripts that are bundled together into a module that we can download and we can set up. So it gives you some of the commands that you can run to set up the project, the basic project setup, and then it gives you commands that you can run to install the modules. So we'll go with the commands that these provide in the later in the session. It also gives you the wrappers around Maven to run, install, clean, or run the plugin, and to set up Jira, and also to reinstall the plugins without restarting the Jira again and again. So these are the functionalities that SDK provides us. Let's first discuss with the most basic command that SDK provides, which is Atlas create Jira plugin. With Atlas create Jira plugin, it will ask you a set of questions like define the group ID, artifact ID, the version, the package. Once you provide all of these basic values, it will create a basic setup for you. So artifact ID is a unique name that you get to your plugin. Now this group ID and artifact ID are the one which actually uniquely identify your package. Then you can say the version number that you want to start with, and the package that you want to install. This package is basically a Java package that it will create for you. And then it will ask you a question that do you want OSGI Java config or not. First of all, what is an OSGI? We'll discuss after this slide, but first let's run this command and see what it gives you. So once you run this command, it will ask you the same set of questions that I've shown in this screenshot. You can give it any name. So the actual values that I would be using for this project would be these. I'll give a uniquely identified group ID, name, artifact ID, and the version I want to start with, and the package name I want to keep. With that, once you run these commands, you give these values, it will set up a basic project for you. So the kind of setup that it will give you would be this. So in your project, you will have few folders. For example, one will be your SRC folder. Ignore the VS code configuration. You'll have this SRC folder. Inside the SRC folder, it will create a package that you have provided the name while running the command. And it will also give you the basic a very small class and interface and its implementation classes in this basic folder structure. Then there is so this is the main folder which contains all of the Java code. Then there is a config, which is a Spring configuration, Spring Java config, which we can use to tell our Spring framework that what are the beans that I want to inject into. So for a front-end engineer, I'll discuss a bit more on what beans are and how we are injecting it. For the backend engineer, would be quite easy to understand, a very simple concept of Spring. Then there is a resource folder. Inside the resource folder, you keep all your static files. It is your CSS, JavaScript, images. Additionally, in the resource folder, when you run this command, you'll also be getting something known as Atlassian plugin XML. So Atlassian plugin XML is something that tells the plugin framework that what are the modules that you are going to use and how you are going to extend the whole Jira product with your plugin. This is just a descriptor of all of those. We'll discuss Atlassian plugin XML in a bit detail later in the session. Then the properties file is related to your I18N configuration. It keeps the key value pairs of your internationalized values. We can ignore the test session for test folder for this session. We are not going to go into this, but this is of course basically to run your test. Then you have a basic POM XML that keeps all the dependencies that are required to use and run this plugin. So I'll quickly take a small pause here if there are any questions. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next part. All right. So what I initially would do when I run this command, after that, what I initially would do, I would replace all of the classes with the names that I want to use. This API folder would contain all of the APIs that your plugin wants to expose, and you can further create the packages and classes inside your folder. But if you look at the initial thing that I would do, I would replace my classes with the name that I want to keep. And I would remove all of the resources that are by default provided to us, because we are actually going to use Webpack to create the CSS or other static files. These will be generated by Webpack for us when we'll create the React project in conjunction with our Java code. We'll remove the test folder, not required for this session. Yep, that's it. I'll replace all of these. So a basic replacement would be, I'll quickly show you. I change the name of the classes with the one that I want. This is a simple thing I've done in this. So your basic folder structure would then be converted into the one that you want to keep. So now let's discuss one of the most important parts of this plugin framework, which is OSGI. Why it was introduced and what purpose does it solve, and how can we leverage it for building the plugins. So all of the Atlassian products basically supports the extensibility through via the plugin, by creating the plugins. So these plugins are created with the combination of multiple Spring Bean classes and your classes. Uh, what OSGI does for us is it helps you create your plugin in its own container, and so that the dependencies that your plugin are using are not basically create issues with the dependencies that other plugins are using. So if two plugins are using the same version, it should not be an issue that it creates a dependency confusion for this whole framework. So what OSGI does is it leverages what OSGI does is it creates a different bundle or set of sandboxes for each of the plugin where they can be installed and they can use their dependencies. Additionally, OSGI also helps to so it basically does is that when you create your plugin, and let's say they in a Jira product there are 10 different plugins that are being used, it will collect all of them at the runtime and then create a final product for you. So all of your dependencies that you are using in your plugins and the plugins that they are using, they can take the dependencies from one another. So let's say your plugin one is exposing something to the world. It can be used by any other plugin through an import statement, and they can use their plugins API, or they can also use the default bundle. So the dependencies that Jira is providing, they can also use those. So all of these are done through OSGI. How we do this, I'll give you a very basic example in the next slide. So these image set of images that I'm going to show you are taken directly from the video that is present in Atlassian YouTube channel. So I'll share uh, the deck with you guys also, and the link to the video after the presentation. So what is an OSGI? So basically, there's a product under which there's an OSGI container. Inside the OSGI container, when you run your product, it creates a service registry. So service registry is a set of key value pairs in which the key is your bean interface. What is a bean class? So bean is just a way to tell your Spring framework that your classes are going to be dependent upon some object, which is your responsibility to pass it to me in my classes that I'm going to use it as a dependency injection. So Spring's IOC, Spring's container, will take care of injecting the dependencies to your classes where you're going to use it. And to tell Spring how we are injecting these dependencies, we create bean objects, right? And anything that you expose to the outer world from your plugin are done through an export function. And anything that you want to import from the outer world, when I say outer world, is basically the OSGI container. You use the import commands, import functions. I'll show you a bit later. But this service registry is a pipeline in which all of these exports are registered. So the key would be your interface, and the value would be the actual implementation of that object. So by default, every product, in Atlassian set up something known as system bundle. So system bundle are set of dependencies that a product actually registers in the OSGI container. These the system bundle dependencies can be used by any of the plugins that are built on top of the object of this product. So if you want to see what are the bundle dependencies that we can use, we can go into, let's say, I started the product and show you how we can see these. If you go into manage app, on the left side, you'll see something known as OSGI. If you click on this OSGI, you can search for system bundle. And here you'll see the list of exported packages that your base product is giving you. So you can use any of these as per your requirement. In this demo, I'll show you how we are going to use template render. Template render is a dependency that that Jira provides you to render various different templates. Basically, you can use velocity template or your soy template. It's a wrapper on top of that, which is a part of dependency that you can use in your plugin. Right. So let me show you how we can do that. So the major part of this is played in Java config file that I showed you previously. We'll discuss a bit more on that. But let's move on with this presentation now. So once you have the system bundle, each plugin in itself is a Spring application which has its own container. So let's say application one, which is your plugin one, and there's an application two, which is your plugin two, are let's see how they both can connect with each other. So let's say there's a class A, and in plugin two there's a class B, which application two wants to expose it to the outer world. And let's say class A wants to use uh, that class B which is present in plugin two. It will register it to the service registry, and anytime that the plugin one wants to use it, it will call that system registry, service registry, and it will ask, okay, give me the class that was exported by the plugin two, and I want to use it in my own application. So it will call that service registry. It will ask for that class, that class that you'll get, that object that you'll get in your Spring application, in your plugin application, would be the proxy to the actual class that is present in Spring application part 2. And let's say if a class C is using that imported dependency, for it there is no difference. For it, it would be like that it is already present in the application one. The proxy to the class B is already present in the application one, so it does not need to know where it is coming from. It will simply use it. That is taken care of by the app Java config Java config, which is something that Spring takes care of. So as an example, as I told you that we'll be using the template render. Template render is something that is coming from system under 0, and we want to use that in our own plugin. So how we'll do that is, first of all, we'll pass in the dependency in POM XML. This dependency has one very important part, which is known as scope. If we pass a scope as provided, what it will say is that, give me this dependency, which is coming from the base product, which is Jira, and I don't want to install it myself. This is a dependency that should be given to me by the Jira product. So we pass in the provided dependency. So OSGI will take care of this, and it will make sure that it is provided to you. Another important factor that we'll need to take care of to actually build this end-to-end is, we'll go into a Java config file, we'll create a bean function. What we are here saying is that, first of all, we use this import OSGI service. As I said, there are two functions, import and export. Anything that you want to export from your plugin, you use as export OSGI service. Anything that you want to import into your plugin, you can use it as import OSGI service. So here I'm using the dependency that I've provided in the POM XML, and I'm saying that use this template render, import this template render from the OSGI container world. So I pass in the template render.class in this import OSGI service. Now Spring will take care of providing this as a dependency to any of the classes that I'm going to use. Because Spring has its own IOC, which will take care of providing the dependency injection. So I'll come to the questions a bit later. Let me first complete it, and then I'll discuss. Right. So there are cases where you might not be able to provide the dependency directly, because it's something that might not be something that given by the system bundle. It would be something that is being provided by some other plugin. In those cases, you, in your POM XML, you have the import package and export packages, where you will be actually explaining that, okay, these are the dependencies that I want to use, and it will be injected to your plugin at the runtime. I'll take a pause here if there are any questions.
Oh, there are two questions in the Zoom chat. So first I have one, like earlier you showed the OSGI page. How did you enable that page? Like I cannot find in my like regular Jira instances.
Whenever I start the plugin, it is always present for me. It's not behind any feature flag. So you should always be seeing that OSGI if your plugin is using the OSGI one.
Well, what do you mean by like is Jira?
So when you start, so when you actually set up the project, it asks you that, do you want that OSGI app config with you or not? You set up that, and it will start running your application in the OSGI container. Ideally, it should always be available. I have not seen any case where I have never seen the OSGI. It has always been present to me. So one of the projects that I'm working on is Performa DC, which is also a plugin that we are building. In that also, I'll always see the OSGI. So I'm not sure if this is something that should not be visible to others.
Yeah, I'm just curious. For example, on Bulldog, how do we see that on Bulldog?
On which product?
On Bulldog Jira instance.
On Bulldog.
Yeah. Or any
So
Jira instance. Oh, so it's under UPM.
It's in manage apps part, where you can see this OSGI.
Okay, it's hidden. So it's hidden. Through the URL, I can access it, but I just couldn't find that OSGI web item, which is very interesting. I can access it in an arbitrary instance environment. Oh, good. Thanks, mate.
So Piyush, the question, isn't the scope provided a Maven thing rather than the Jira plugin ecosystem thing? Yet it is a Maven thing, but the once you provide this as a provided dependency, it is a concept of a Maven, but we are using it here as a way to tell our OSGA that this is how I'm getting the dependency, which is being provided to me by something else, which is a similar concept of a Maven.
I also had one
But
question.
additionally, yeah.
Yeah, so the similar question related to the scope. How do we know what scope to provide? Like, do we need to provide it provided or compile, or like how do we decide that? And let's say if we like just give provided and then at the runtime it is not able to satisfy, then how do we handle that exceptions, or like how do we make those precautions?
Yeah, this is one of the problems that I when I had to look at which dependency I need to use and is it a scoped one or not, I always have to go through the documentations. And Jira exposes a set of classes that you can use as provided dependency. And if you don't know that, if it's not available with you, you'll have to use it as a runtime dependency. Uh, for the provided one, it will throw an error in case it is not provided by the bundle. But for the runtime one, you will get runtime errors.
Yeah, because I
So
remember
for
in
me, the discoverability is one of the biggest problem as well.
Right. So for me, when I so I remember that in the onboarding assignment, I was like struggling with that dependency scope and took me a day to figure out that compile provided. So I did that with some.
Go on.
Yeah, I mean, I just figured out by putting it provided or compile and like playing around with it.
Yeah. So one of the basic concepts that you need to understand is why the scope is there and what kind of values that is it take. There's a very limited documentation that is present on Atlassian website. I link that with the presentation later after this after this session. Sorry, but if you go through that, you'll know that why we use this scope and what kind of classes does it use. And anytime that you need to look at the dependencies, you go into the OSGI this tab and you can see those. Additionally, you also can go to the documentations to figure those out.
Okay, got it. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. So moving forward, let's discuss what are the basic building blocks of a plugin. So there are four basic building blocks of plugin, which is one is an API. So APIs are basically Jira APIs or the front-end API. When I talk about front-end API, is basically WRM with its all provided functions. Then there are webhooks. We are not going to go into webhooks, but webhooks are the outbound data that you can throw from your product to the outside world. Then there are modules. So Jira provides you, not the Jira, the whole product provides you, every product in Atlassian provides you with set of modules that you can use to extend your application's UI. We'll discuss a bit more on modules, but there are many different modules that you can use, UI-based modules or non-UI based modules. Then there are entity props, which are completely out of the scope of this talk. If you want to look at the information about this, it is well described in the documentation. So, but for this session, we'll only discuss about the APIs and modules. First of all, let's discuss what P2 modules are. So P2 modules are the modules that are commonly used to extend the user interface by probably adding links, panels, or new pages through servlets, or the different sections. Some of the Jira modules can also be extended for non-UI things like permissions, keyboard shortcuts, workflows. You can, or the routes, you can extend those which are the non-UI elements of a product. So the modules are divided into two categories. One is the basic module, another is an advanced module. The basic modules are only three, which is web section, web panel, and web item. Web section is a section you want to inject into the list of items in your product. I'll show you an example a bit later. Then web item is a link that you can inject into any of the section. And web panel you have all must have gone through. It's one of the onboarding tasks that we create a web panel into the product. So if you go to this link, you'll see there are somewhere around 30, 40 modules that are provided to us that we can use to extend our product. So these are well documented, and there's no streamlined way of creating the module. I mean, the attributes of each module is very different from each other. So there's no single documentation that you can follow to create a module. You'll have to go to the documentation of each of the module to understand how we're gonna extend it. So before we understand how we put the module and how we tell the plugin framework that what are the modules that we're going to use, first of all, we need to understand what plugin descriptor is. I've previously shown you a file called Atlassian plugin.xml. Every plugin contains this Atlassian plugin.xml, which can be one or more files, but at the runtime, they are all combined together into a single XML configuration. This plugin XML file basically describes the state of your plugin, the areas where you're extending, and the kind of modules that you're going to use. So when you run Atlas create plugin command, Atlas create product plugin command, you'll actually get this Atlassian plugin XML out of the box, which you can then extend uh, to either add different modules onto the product and or to tell Atlassian what are my internationalizations and where they are present. It also is used to tell the product or the pages that what resources I want to load, which CSS file, which JS file, or which images I want to load on which page. So all of that information is present in this Atlassian plugin XML file. It resides in SRC main resource folder. So if you look at this, we have Atlassian plugin XML under the resource folder. Yeah, so I'll demo that how we can create a web section under that web section, how we can create a web item. But before we do that, let's first discuss the basic concept of a web section and a web item. These two are the basic modules that are provided by Jira product as a plugin, as a extensibility. So web section, inside web section, what you do is you create a key. It's a unique key which is used to identify that section and the location under which you want to put the section in. So location I have added here is admin plugins menu. So what admins plugin menu? So these sections, these locations are default provided by the product. These are the unique names. So you can use the documentation to find out the name of the section where you want to inject this in. So when I say admin plugin menu, I am basically referring to this part. Right. So right now I have created a section called Themify configuration. Under this, there is a web item called settings. We'll look at this, how we do that in code, but part of it is already available in this slideshow. Once you create the section, you can give a weight to that section. Weight here works exactly similar to how weightage works. Do you want to keep this above something else, or do you want to keep this below something else? Weight decides that. Then there is a label and a description. Label is the label of a section that you want to give. It can be a key. When you say key, it basically looks at the properties file where you have given all of the internationalized properties. So it is a key value pair where the key is a name and the value is the actual description of that key. When you say label key performer as an example here, it will look at that properties file and it will figure out what should be the name of your section. Then if you want to inject a web item into your given web section, what you'll need to do is in the sections part, you'll need to prepend it with the location and then the key of your web section. So admin plugins menu is a location where I want to add this web item, and the performa admin section, which is the key of this subsection, is where I want to actually inject this web item. Link is the one, so which says that once I click on this web item, it should redirect me to this XYZ page. So for example, in this, I have created a themify configuration web section under which I've created one single link, which is a web item. So let's look at the code. The code is quite similar as I've shown in the presentation. So in Atlassian plugin.xml, we have defined the web section and we have defined the web item. With these two things, we'll be able to create a section and an item. So right now, what I have done is I've passed in a URL, which is a uniquely identified name of my plugin. What I'm saying is there is a servlet then I'm going to create and redirect me to that URL. So I'll show you how we can create a servlet, what servlet is and how it works. Yeah. So what is a React servlet? So if you want to create a new page in your product, you use servlet. And you don't have to, for all of these basic modules or the advanced modules, you don't have to write everything by yourself. There's a command that is given to us in our SDK, which is Atlas create Jira plugin module. With Atlas create Jira plugin module, it will ask you a question that which module you want to inject. So you can choose the module that you want to inject. For example, here there are around 34 modules, and you can choose any one of them by providing the number. If you want a web section or a web item, you can choose their number. If you want, for example, servlet, you can pass in 21. With that, if you pass in this, it will your SDK will take care of providing all the dependencies that are required for this module, and it will create the classes if it's required. So if we choose servlet, what it will do is, if we pass 21 and we choose servlet, it will ask you the set of things. For example, what should be the name of your class? And these are the set of questions it will ask, and it will basically create a Java file for you, basically a Java servlet file for you. For now, for this tutorial, I've given the name as Themify React Servlet. This will take care of looking at the URL and running the velocity template or any template of my choice. So if you look at the Atlassian plugin.xml, if we are using a servlet, we'll need to provide this tag servlet. And with that, you need to provide the URL parameter, URL pattern. So URL pattern is basically that tells that this is the new page with this new URL I am creating. And that is the name of this. So I have created a unique name for this, which basically you can create a name of the package so that it is uniquely qualified. And after that, I passed in star. So any URL that would be, let's say, com.samversusgo.themify.a or b or c, all of them will be handled by my servlet class, which is this one. Right now, what I'm doing here is this class needs to be overridden with a function called doGet. In this doGet, we respond with the actual HTML that needs to be looked at, that needs to be rendered on the page. So if you look at the demo, if I click on settings page, it redirects me to this Jira plugin servlet with my URL/settings. Right, this is what I've given the name in my web item, and it returns me with this hello world page. This hello world page is coming from this function where I'm just writing the HTML value. We can also extend this class with our own velocity template or any other template to the template render that I've shown in the previous part. So now let's go ahead with the session. We have already discussed about the React servlet. Now, how do you use this servlet to tell which velocity template I want to render. So what we do here is we have used the import OSGI service to import the provided dependency, which was this template render. We have created a final property template render, and then inside the constructor, we are actually injecting it. So Spring will take care of injecting this renderer object through its IOC. And then we can call render.render, and we can pass in the velocity template that we want to render. All templates are, as a standard practice, lives in the templates folder, but it should ideally always be inside your resource folder. So in resource folder, you can create this templates folder. Inside the template folder, you can create your velocity template. So if you look at this, I have created this render.render function and provided the dependency. And I've said that this is the themify settings velocity template that I want to use. And it resides in my resource folder, templates folder, where I'm keeping this velocity template. With that, if we go to part 5, and let's say let's name and clean. We do have to do that Atlas clean and install when we change branches, but in my future session, I'll also give you a better dev, dev, dev productivity, in which I'll show you how we can probably use the hot module reloading process of reloading all of the front-end code, or how do we, without stopping the Jira, how can we load the changes? One more thing that I want to discuss here. If we pass in the meta decorator with the content, what it tells this velocity template is that I want some of the basic functionalities of the admin page. So here I pass the content as all.admin. What it will do is it will create the page with the menu list that you see in the admin page, and all of the CSS and GS that are required to render those menus. So once this is ready, I'll show you. Okay, let's look at the web item that we have created. Settings. And now, as you can see, this hello world is actually coming inside the Jira admin page. And all of the CSS and GS that are required to render all of this is also injected just by providing this meta decorator. So with this, you have yeah.
Yeah, Sanyam. For this, should we specify something in the plugin descriptor? Like,
Not
I
at
mean,
all.
you added, okay.
This is very standard. So it gives you this meta tag with name decorator and the content. You don't have to specify anything in your XML file. This will bring in all of the dependencies that are required, the sources that are required to render the page.
Okay, so that means the renderer that we, I mean, that we inject to the class will take care of this?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
It will take care of this.
Yeah, okay.
I have already extended a lot of time. Should we go ahead if you guys want to? Or I can also, I'm also gonna do another session, a part 2 of this, where I'm gonna show the front end part. We can go ahead with that also.